Adrian and I have been in a relationship for 8 years. 3 days before the wedding, I discovered that his computer stored over 10,000 photos of the same girl. I secretly booked a flight abroad on the wedding day, quietly watching him act as if nothing was wrong. On the wedding day, the bride ran away from the wedding, and he went crazy. Managerly, is there still a spot available at the overseas branch you mentioned last time? I've decided, I want to go. My boss sounded very pleased when he heard I agreed to go abroad for training. Alright, I'll submit your information right now, but I heard you're about to get married. It's okay, I'm not getting married anymore, don't worry. My voice trembled slightly. To avoid being discovered by the other party, I hung up the phone immediately after speaking. My eyes were somewhat dazed as I stared at the tens of thousands of photos of girls on Adrian's computer. After graduation, we both joined the same company, working in different departments. Tonight he went to a bachelor party hosted by his friends, and his phone was turned off. The manager couldn't find him and urgently needed the plan, so the call came to me. So I turned on his computer for the first time and discovered these photos. In an instant, 8 years of memories flooded my mind. After being together for so long, he never had any photos of me on his phone, nor did he keep any record of our relationship. No matter how much I cried or threw a tantrum, he only said that since we see each other every day, there was no need to keep mementos. It was only at this moment that I realized, it's not that it's unnecessary, it's that I am not necessary to him. For 8 years, I made every excuse for his indifference. My stubbornness looked like a joke. When his friend found out we were getting married, a slip of the tongue suddenly echoed in my ears. Really? I thought you were going to be alone for life because of Maggie. You're actually getting married? Isn't this just out of spite? At that time, I didn't notice the embarrassed look in Adrian's eyes as he confidently pounded his chest. We are doing this for love. Now I finally understand why he asked that question, and I no longer have the courage to say it. I took a few deep breaths and closed the laptop. I opened my phone wanting to tell Adrian I wanted to break up, but saw that he hadn't even replied to the message I sent a day ago about choosing a wedding dress. I clicked into Facebook. The background was pitch black, with no updates at all. Under the profile picture, there was only one empty word, waiting. I forced a bitter smile and collapsed helplessly onto the sofa. I used to not know that he had someone else in his heart. I just thought he was introverted and not good at expressing himself. Now that I think about it, I was ridiculously naive. I asked him many times about the description on his Facebook profile, but he never answered. Now, at this moment, I finally know the truth. There are only 3 days left until our simple wedding, and I set the countdown as my phone's live wallpaper to remind myself every day. Watching the seconds tick on the screen, I rubbed my sore eyes and suppressed my overwhelming fatigue. Just as I was about to book the ticket, Adrian's friend called me. Elena, Adrian is drunk. Why don't you come over and take him back? I'll send you the address. Through the receiver, I faintly heard Adrian's familiar voice calling Maggie. My heart was suddenly and unexpectedly gripped. The other party immediately covered the phone and hung up. I shook my head to dispel the unwarranted emotions, changed my clothes, and walked to the entrance, only to see that the half of the couple's keychain belonging to Adrian, which I had carefully chosen, was carelessly thrown on the cabinet. This was custom designed by an original shop based on our experiences. He said it was too childish and never wore it. After thinking for a moment, I picked up the keychain and threw it into the trash can. Looking up, I also caught sight of the couple's mugs he never unwrapped under the coffee table. It felt like a silent mockery of my one-sided drama. A wave of helpless irritation surged in my heart. I picked up the trash can and threw all the couple's belongings into the bag. After taking out the trash, I took a taxi to the address sent by his friend. At the moment I reached the door of the private room, laughter and teasing questions came from inside. Why is Maggie back today? Could it be that she regrets hearing the news that our Adrian is getting married? I took a deep breath, a smile tugged at the corner of my lips, and I reached out to push the door open and enter. The laughter and noise inside instantly stopped, and everyone's faces were awkward. The man who was supposed to marry me in 3 days was lying tenderly in a woman's arms. That woman's face, I had just seen it countless times on his computer. Adrian's friend didn't expect me to arrive so quickly and hurriedly reached out to pull him away from Maggie. Unfortunately, Adrian seemed to have drunk quite a bit and was completely indifferent. Mumbling indistinctly, he cursed, "Get away. Don't touch me." It was the first time I had seen him this drunk. His friend leaned close to his ear and said, "Elena is here to pick you up. Wake up. You're about to get married." The others saw this and also stepped forward to help. After a lot of effort, they finally pulled Adrian's hand away from Maggie. He collapsed heavily onto the sofa, his face flushed red. Only then did his friend finally relax and introduce me. "This is our high school classmate Maggie, who went abroad in her sophomore year and just came back today, coincidentally catching our reunion." Adrian drank too much, don't read too much into it. If it were before, I might have lost control and questioned them on the spot. Knowing full well that Adrian and I were about to get married, why did they have to bring Maggie? Why didn't they stop it? But now, I just smiled indifferently. Maggie looked at me with a playful and probing gaze from the side. Until Adrian's friend started introducing my identity. When the words fiancé were mentioned, Adrian, who had been silent on the sofa for a while, shouted angrily, "She's a friend." In an instant, the hand beneath my sleeve clenched tightly. The palm hurt from the nails digging in, trembling faintly. The expressions of the people around changed, and their eyes showed difficulty when looking at me. This wasn't the first time Adrian didn't want to reveal my identity. Long ago, when he refused to post on Facebook, refused to appear together at the company, and refused wedding invitations from both sides' elders and friends, I had already guessed our ending. I just stubbornly wanted to bet on 8 years of feelings. In the end, I still lost. I still forced a smile and nodded at Maggie. "Hello, I'm Elena, Adrian's friend. You look even better than in the photos." As soon as the sentence was finished, the private room fell completely silent. Everyone exchanged glances with various expressions. Maggie smiled dismissively and reached for the fruit plate on the table. Just then, Adrian, who had just slumped down, straightened up again. "Maggie, you're allergic to mangoes, you can't eat that." Maggie's hand froze in midair as she looked at his serious expression with some amusement. She said softly, "Why are you the same as 10 years ago, fool? That's a watermelon, you're drunk." At that moment, it felt as if something exploded loudly in my mind. The fragments pierced my heart, leaving it bloody and torn. It turned out he didn't forget, he just didn't care about me. For 8 years, I reminded him countless times that I am allergic to seafood, yet his first choice for dates was always seafood restaurants. I went from being angry at first, to later compromising, even deceiving myself. He was just too tired from work, and his mind couldn't hold anything else. But today, reality woke me up once again. Every detail revealed the fact that he doesn't love me. I expressionlessly helped him up from the sofa, and when we went downstairs to catch a taxi, Maggie came running out. With gentle eyes, she smiled warmly at Adrian's face. She carefully reminded me, "Adrian has a low tolerance for alcohol and is allergic to the ingredients in hangover medicine. When you get home, make him a cup of honey water, and the water temperature must not exceed 60 degrees. He will be fine soon, otherwise he will have a headache the next morning." Adrian had never told me these things before. I gritted my teeth and said nothing, turning around to get into the car. But she called me back once again. "By the way, how about I add you as a contact? If he feels unwell at night, you can ask me. After Adrian drinks, he doesn't sleep well. You need to keep an eye on him all night. If he kicks off the blanket, you must cover him immediately, or he'll definitely have a fever tomorrow." My nails dug in almost to the flesh, and my eyelashes trembled uncontrollably. After staring into her innocent eyes for a long while, I finally nodded. We added each other as friends, and only then did I realize that her Facebook background was a photo with Adrian. The two people in the picture from 10 years ago looked young and naive, their eyes determined, fingers tightly intertwined. When the car door closed after getting in, tears silently slid down the corners of my eyes. I had only heard others talk about the power of a first love before, and I used to scoff at it. Sincerity always earns sincerity in return. But at this moment, my thoughts wavered. Adrian's phone vibrated several times on the road. All were messages from Maggie asking if he had arrived home safely. I unlocked the screen, intending to reply politely. But then I saw his chat history with friends. A fake marriage is my last chance. If she still doesn't come back, I will really give up. Send the news of my wedding in the class group, but don't say much to others. My finger paused on the screen, then I suddenly turned off my phone. But my breathing couldn't help becoming rapid. No matter how much I tried to speak, it felt like no oxygen could enter my chest. Tears streamed more wildly and fiercely from the corners of my eyes. No wonder he suddenly proposed to me 3 days ago. No ring, no wedding house, no bride price. Only one sentence, don't tell the family. I thought he felt guilty for not giving me enough ceremony, thought my efforts had finally moved him. But I didn't expect that the wedding I had been looking forward to for 8 years was just a bargaining chip to provoke Maggie to return to the country. The last trace of reluctance in my heart for this relationship has finally been completely exhausted. I can only keep comforting myself. Since I have already decided to leave, everything about them no longer has any relation to me. After getting home, Adrian sobered up a bit from the alcohol and went straight to the bathroom to freshen up. I prepared honey water for him according to Maggie's advice. In the last 3 days, I just don't want to leave any regrets for this relationship. Just as I sat down on the sofa, the boss called. He said to hand over the work I was handling before leaving. After the call ended, Adrian's irritated voice suddenly rang out, "Leaving? Where are you going?" He wiped his wet hair with one hand and asked me expressionlessly. I handed him the honey water and said lightly, "It's nothing, just a business trip." He was too lazy to think much, or maybe he simply didn't care about anything of mine. I took the cup and was about to drink when I noticed honey had been added. My brows instantly furrowed. He angrily questioned me, "Who did you learn this from? Don't just blindly look things up online, what's on the internet isn't necessarily suitable for everyone." He slammed the cup heavily on the table and turned back to the bedroom. A bitter smile involuntarily spread across my face. As expected, the white moonlight's methods were not something I could imitate. The next day was originally set as the day to take the wedding photos. Adrian woke up as if nothing had happened, and his attitude towards me was as cold as ever. After seeing his lingering feelings for Maggie, I would never think that his nature was like this. After finishing the meal and getting ready to go out, he glanced at his phone. Suddenly, he said, "Let's not take the wedding photos in the park. Let's go to the school instead. I saw online that this has been popular recently." I paused while clearing the dishes. "Okay, whatever you say." I knew why he suddenly changed his mind. Because Maggie posted on Facebook this morning about nostalgically visiting our alma mater. I didn't confront him about his childish life face to face, I just didn't want to embarrass myself when the relationship was about to end. There was only a day and a half left before I went abroad, and I wanted to leave some dignity for both of us. Before going out, I guessed what would happen today, so I deliberately chose a wedding dress that was easy to walk in. The photographer took us to the playground. Adrian looked up and gazed for a while, finally spotting a familiar figure in the shade of a tree. Without greeting me, he immediately turned and went to find Maggie. I looked at the confused photographer and smiled awkwardly. "Sorry to have made you come for nothing. Let's call it a day, we'll still pay you." Even though I chose a wedding dress that was convenient to move in, it was still difficult to walk on the track wearing high heels. I finally managed to reach Adrian's side, and he was animatedly chatting with Maggie. The groom's jacket was casually thrown on the ground by him. When his gaze landed on me, his brows furrowed noticeably. As if afraid I would accidentally reveal our relationship in front of Maggie, he hurriedly said, "What are you doing here?" "I'm just chatting with my classmate for a bit." I was stunned, then forced a smile. "There's some unfinished business at the company." I have to go back. I'm wearing the wedding dress and didn't bring my phone, so I had to come over to tell you. A flash of astonishment passed through his eyes. In the past, I would have definitely lost face on the spot, but this time I didn't say a word, not wanting to be a bother in front of him. His expression softened, and he nodded without a word. I turned around and left, stepping awkwardly with every step. The voice fading in my ears became unclear. Don't overthink it, I just took a wedding dress shop advertisement, and they insisted on having me and her shoot together. I didn't lie, I spent the whole day busy handing over work at the company. When I got home at night, he surprisingly had dinner ready for me. Seeing me come in, he immediately put away his phone, his expression somewhat unnatural. You're back. Why so late today? Dinner is already made. This morning, seeing you in the wedding dress, you seemed a bit thinner. I paused for a moment. Lost weight? It seems like you haven't eaten much since seeing those photos. Now, seeing the greasy dishes on the table, I furrowed my brows. You eat by yourself, I have no appetite, I'm going to rest. When I turned around, the wound on my ankle rubbed raw by the high heels was exposed in Adrian's sight. As soon as I entered the bedroom, he came to me holding a first aid kit. In my memory, this seemed to be the first time in 8 years that he showed concern for me. Unfortunately, the wound had already scabbed over, and I no longer needed him. I politely declined his kindness, and Adrian's expression darkened. He went out again and brought back a piece of cake, placing it by the bedside. Sorry, I really didn't expect her to go to school this morning. We've known each other for so long, and when you run into a classmate, you can't just not say hello. Don't overthink it, Before he finished speaking, I glanced at the cake on the bedside table and interrupted. I've been off sugar for a long time, and I only eat boiled vegetables during meals, remember? To be in the best condition for the wedding, I lived like a monk for nearly a week. But he didn't care about it at all. After being together for so long, it was the first time he lowered his head only to be repeatedly rejected by me. Adrian finally lost his good expression, his face returning to its usual coldness. This time he turned and left the room, not coming back in. By midnight, my stomach was growling. When I got up quietly to get some water, I saw the faint light from his phone screen in the living room. The light shone on Adrian's face as his fingers flew over the keyboard, his eyes curved in a smile. Remembering he said he never stayed up late and therefore didn't want to stay up with me for New Year's, my heart grew colder. I didn't get water and turned back to the room directly. The last day was originally planned to be the day we would register our marriage. The moment I stepped out of the room, he was already gone. No explanation, no message. I habitually opened Maggie's Facebook and indeed saw her post about being hospitalized and receiving treatment. When will she learn to take care of herself? After 10 years, she still has to rely on you. How can an adult, clearly aware of their allergens, end up hospitalized? I have no way of knowing, nor do I want to waste time exploring it further. I spent the whole day packing my luggage. Adrian still hadn't shown up by night. He only sent a message saying he was working overtime. I looked at the 4 big characters on the screen, full of sarcasm. He can't even be bothered to think up a lie for me. That day I called his team leader, who specifically said that to let him rest assured during his marriage leave, no work was assigned to him. I guess he's probably working overtime in the hospital now. In the early morning, the countdown on my phone wallpaper finally hit 0. I spent the night making do on the sofa, and the next day after washing up, I headed straight to the airport. On the way, I couldn't help but feel relieved. Luckily, the wedding was fake and I didn't notify my family, otherwise, I really wouldn't know how to explain running away from the wedding to my parents. The moment I entered the airport, I called Adrian to talk about breaking up. The ringtone just rang once before he hung up on me directly. Then, he sent a voice message. His tone was extremely impatient. I'm almost there, why are you in such a hurry? I said I was holding the wedding, do you think I can just run away? Maggie was discharged early to attend the wedding, and she even got into a car accident on the way. Can you be a bit more understanding? You keep my friends calm first, I have something to tell you today. After the voice message ended, I expressionlessly typed and sent him a text message. Let's break up, you can have the wedding. Without waiting for his reply, I immediately blocked and deleted his contact information. I also deliberately set my phone to airplane mode and boarded the plane. During the 10-hour flight, I spent half the time with my eyes closed, thinking about the 8 years we spent together. Loving for so long, loving him seemed to have become a habit. Suddenly parting felt as hard to let go as blood relatives. The moment I set foot on foreign soil, I had a surreal feeling, as if everything could start anew. Just as I opened my phone, the first call I received was from the wedding company, frantic with worry. Miss Elena, is your wedding still happening? Almost all the few guests have already left. We've never encountered such a situation before, the bride hasn't arrived, and the groom is nowhere to be seen. We called Adrian to explain the situation. The moment he heard you weren't there, he angrily hung up. It took us a lot of effort to get in touch with you. My hand holding the phone froze in midair. While hailing a cab, I said lightly, then don't bother with it. I've already paid the balance, your work is done, thank you for your hard work. I hung up the phone and got into the car. The bitterness in my heart kept surging uncontrollably. The last bit of hope deep down, that Adrian would go crazy with worry when he saw I was missing, was completely shattered. Forget it, he could even stand me up at the wedding, so what if he knows I ran away from it? I went to the apartment address my boss gave me. Just as I was about to go upstairs with my luggage, Adrian's friend called again. We have already broken up, and there's no need to keep in touch with his friends anymore. I should make that clear. I hesitated for 2 seconds before answering, but on the other end came Adrian's extremely angry scolding. Elena, what are you thinking? Who gave you the nerve to block my number? Where have you gone? Speak. Didn't I already explain to you? Maggie had a car accident, I just have something here and can't leave. Can you stop making a fuss? Did you not go to the wedding today? Where are you now? Send me the address. I furrowed my brows and said coldly, didn't you see the message I sent you? We've already broken up, wherever I go has nothing to do with you. I also blocked your friend's number, don't contact me anymore. I didn't expect him to be the first to miss the wedding, and yet he had the nerve to call me and hold me accountable. Before he could say another word, I hung up and added the number to my blacklist. I walked into the apartment building dragging my luggage and took the elevator up. After tidying up the room a bit, I just relaxed and sat on the sofa to rest when my boss called. His voice was filled with obvious worry. Elena, didn't you tell your husband about your trip abroad? He just called me asking about it, sounded like he was about to lose his mind and was ready to call the police. I gave him your address overseas. I paused in my breath and sighed deeply into the phone. Forget it, it's nothing. I told him, but he's not really going to come looking for me. Besides, we're not married, so he has nothing to do with me anymore. My boss seemed to understand a bit from my brief words. In the end, he just reminded me not to let personal issues affect my work, then hung up. I irritably ruffled my hair and opened the blocked messages on my phone. Only then did I see the screen full of his numbers. In the 8 years we've been together, the number of times he has actively contacted me doesn't even add up to more than today alone. It's truly ridiculous and ironic. Maybe he didn't want to be absent from his simple wedding as one of the 2 main characters at the same time, that would be too embarrassing. Now I finally have time to open the photo album and clear out the photos I secretly took of him in the past. My finger slid along the screen, as if I loved him once again. The moment I completely deleted all the photos, I stood up from the sofa and walked downstairs. I bought a bottle of whiskey and came back up. When we were together, because he hated the smell of alcohol, no matter how sad I was, I could only stare blankly out the window. Otherwise, he would throw me and the alcohol out of the house. After breaking up, I regained my freedom. At this moment, as if out of spite, I poured myself a full glass and drank it all in one go. The alcohol hit me, and my consciousness gradually blurred. Habitually, I opened Maggie's Facebook, only to see that she had updated a post 8 hours ago. 8 hours ago, that was just when the wedding had just begun. In the picture, a familiar wrist lazily rested on the edge of the hospital bed. Caption: When you were with me, I felt like I had the whole world and was afraid of nothing. Tears immediately welled up in my eyes. A cold smile appeared at the corner of my lips. My hand trembled as I typed a line of words, making mistakes and deleting and typing again. After a while, she left a comment: "You win, I give you back your whole world." I deleted her contact information, putting the final period on this relationship. The moment I turned off my phone, I collapsed onto the sofa and fell into a deep sleep. The next day, the alarm went off. With swollen eyes, I washed up and went to work. It was my first day dealing with the overseas branch, and I was so busy I didn't have time to think about him. Letting go of a wrong relationship was much easier than I had imagined. My phone didn't receive any calls from home anymore. I thought it was over between us, but after work, I saw a familiar figure standing under the building of the foreign company. Adrian stood with his back to the company door, clutching his phone with an impatient tone. The condition relapsed and the wound got infected? Go see a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I still have things to do here. If she's hospitalized, wouldn't it be more convenient for someone else to go instead of me? Enough, don't call me unless it's urgent. I glanced at the footsteps without stopping, dodged him, and was about to return to the apartment. But just after taking 2 steps, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Before I could run, my wrist was tightly grabbed by Adrian. Why didn't you tell me you were going abroad? Is it just because I took Maggie to the hospital? Haven't I already explained it to you? Can you please stop making a fuss? Why is everything in the house moved out? That was our shared home, don't I have the right to know? I thought I was brave enough. But meeting him again in a foreign country and hearing his reproachful words, tears still uncontrollably welled up in my eyes. I forcefully shook off his hand and turned to look at him. Tell you? Why should I tell you, and what exactly should I tell you? That I saw tens of thousands of photos of Maggie on your computer? Or that I saw you using the wedding as a bargaining chip to pressure Maggie into returning to the country? His face, worn out from staying up all night rushing to catch a flight, was something I had never seen before, with bloodshot veins spreading wildly beneath his eyes. If it were before, maybe I would have softened my heart and obediently given up the opportunity abroad without him even having to say a word, just to go home with him. But this time, when I looked into his helpless eyes, I couldn't feel even a shred of sympathy or pity in my heart. Adrian's anxious expression froze on his face. He obviously didn't expect me to look at his computer. His first reaction was to question me. You touched my computer? Didn't I say all the stuff on it is work-related? Who told you to look? Don't I have any privacy? Realizing he was too emotional, he took a deep breath and was about to explain. I sneered on the spot. You were busy spending your single night crying in Maggie's arms, your team leader couldn't reach you and urgently needed the data, so the call came to me. Do you think I wanted to look? I felt disgusted just glancing at it. This was the first time in 8 years of dating that I gave him a cold face and a resolute attitude. Adrian, however, thought I was just being jealous and making a fuss. When he spoke again, his tone softened, carrying a hint of pleading. I can explain the stuff on the computer, it's just that it was stored for too long and I forgot to delete it. About the wedding, you know I was dumped by her before. I said that in front of friends just to save face. I didn't expect you to misunderstand. Believe me, from the moment I said I would marry you, she was no longer in my heart. Taking care of her was just out of friendship and obligation. She happened to return to the country, and I also wanted to put the past behind me. His explanation sounded to me like nothing more than an excuse to justify his actions. The cold smirk on my lips deepened. Really? Adrian, are you trying to say that you've been in a relationship with me for 8 years without understanding your past? What am I to you? A broom to sweep away your past memories? From the countless times you gave up on me to choose her, there's no need for explanations anymore. Your actions are the best answer. Don't you find the words you say laughable yourself? Aren't you afraid I'll be sad, afraid I'll be disappointed, afraid I'll leave? So why come back now? To hear me say we're breaking up face to face? His face gradually paled as I questioned him. He opened his mouth but couldn't say a single word. Just as I was about to turn and leave, he slowly spoke, I can delete the things on the computer right now. If I said I was wavering at first, but after hearing that you didn't go to the wedding, I already understood my own feelings. Now that I'm here to make amends, can you give me one more chance? I didn't look back, nor did I say a word. With his hopeful eyes on me, I walked away firmly. This time, he didn't stop me. Can I give this relationship one more chance? Since Maggie appeared, I've asked myself this countless times. I've also given him countless chances. But the result is obvious, I never want to repeat the same mistake again. After returning to the apartment and quickly freshening up, there was a series of knocks on the door. When I opened it, I was met with a huge insulated lunchbox. Adrian's sunny smile appeared from behind it. I heard that food abroad is hard to swallow, so I specially made this for you. Try it while it's hot. This was the first time he smiled so happily when facing me. It was also the first time he cooked for me. I was momentarily stunned, and when I came to my senses, I slammed the door shut. Unexpectedly, he wasn't angry and patiently continued to knock gently. I slid down weakly behind the door, my body pressed against it. Why did he only start loving me after we separated? I didn't need it anymore. He knocked for half an hour, and I just sat on the floor for half an hour. Suddenly, the doorbell rang outside. It seemed the hospital was calling again. He lost his patience and his voice became irritable, didn't I say? She's sick, go see a doctor. The car accident wasn't caused by me, my wedding was ruined, and I really have something very important right now. The person on the other end kept arguing with him for a long time. The sound of footsteps came, and the outside of the door fell completely silent. Only then did I get up to open the door, finding just a thermal lunchbox left on the ground. As expected, even if I ran away from the wedding, I still couldn't win against her. But I no longer wanted it. I threw the lunchbox into the trash can and took out my phone to order takeout. I thought Adrian would buy a ticket to go back to his country as soon as he got this call. But unexpectedly, the next day when I went downstairs, I saw him waiting at the door again, holding a bouquet of fresh flowers. I glanced over, trying to pretend I didn't see him, and left. But he followed my steps and caught up. Let me take you to work. I heard the security abroad isn't very good. I'm worried about you going alone. Hearing this, my steps suddenly stopped on the spot. Adrian, do you think playing the role of a deeply affectionate person is very enjoyable? When I was in the country, countless times I worked overtime and waited alone for the bus after work. When you came to pick me up, what did you say? Have you forgotten? You said other girls live like this too, so does being single mean you don't deserve to live? If you're scared, just hire a bodyguard. You have your own things to do. As he spoke, his pupils trembled slightly. I continued, now I also have my own things to do. Please leave, and never come to bother me again. I walked to the roadside and hailed a car. Just as I opened the door to get in, he slipped in as well. I admit I was an unqualified boyfriend before. Now, can you give me a chance to make it up? I don't want us to break up just because of a misunderstanding. I didn't want to waste any more time with him, so I simply closed my eyes to rest. His phone kept ringing and being turned off on the way, off and ringing again. I impatiently snapped, can you mind your own business? Don't show up in front of me. We're already broken up, what's the point of you doing this? Your beloved is in the country, not here. As I said this, the car arrived right at the company building. I immediately got out and closed the door. I didn't give him a single minute. Once inside the elevator, I took out my phone and called Adrian's team leader. He's not married, so why can he still take marriage leave? Is there no work for him at the company? Can you please make him go back soon? The other party hesitated for a moment before explaining, Adrian is on annual leave, I can't do anything about it. I hung up the phone irritably. For the following week, he appeared around me like a ghost at all times. I have to say, habits are a terrifying thing. From my initial anger to later indifference, it only took a few days. On the 7th night, the landlord of the apartment called me. They said someone upstairs complained about Adrian causing a disturbance, seeing him often outside my door, and asked if he was my friend. I was full of confusion and pressed the landlord for more details, only to find out that Adrian had set up a tent downstairs in the apartment building and kept the lights on all night every night. As long as someone enters my building, he has to rush up and ask for the apartment number to confirm if they are a resident. Many people have already moved out of the apartment because of this. I hurriedly got up from the sofa and ran to the balcony. Sure enough, I saw a small tent downstairs with glaring lights on. I took his number out of the blacklist and called him, asking for a long time. He finally spoke slowly. I'm afraid it's not safe for you to live alone. I'm here temporarily and haven't found a place to rent in this building yet, so I'm just staying downstairs for now. By the way, I have some good news for you. I have already applied to the company and secured a spot for our department's overseas training. The excitement in his tone was unmistakable, just like how I once looked forward to the future when we first fell in love. But I had no extra emotions, I just said I knew and hung up the phone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Outside, a heavy rain started in the early morning. My heart felt like it was being twisted. I went to the balcony and looked down, but in the dim light, I couldn't see where he was. Irritated, I climbed back into bed, covered my ears, and forced myself to rest. The next day when I went to work, the rain had stopped, and the sky was as gray as if the apocalypse had come. The spot where he usually waited for me was empty. I paused for a moment, suppressed the disappointment in my heart, and took a taxi to work. Remarkably, I didn't receive any harassing messages from him all day asking to make peace. After work, it started raining heavily again. I waited an hour before I could get a taxi. Unexpectedly, the heavy rain affected visibility, and when the driver passed an intersection, he couldn't see the traffic light clearly and was hit by a car rushing out from the side, causing the taxi to overturn on the spot. The tremendous impact made my internal organs ache as if they were shattered, and in an instant, I felt the arrival of death. I weakly called out to the driver for help, and after a long time without a response, I realized he was already barely alive. The heavy rain kept washing over the shattered glass on the car window, drowning out my cries for help. Blood flowed freely from my wounds all over my body, and my body temperature dropped rapidly. In my blurred consciousness, the only person I could think of was still Adrian. Fortunately, my phone was inside my clothes, and with my last bit of strength, I managed to press the emergency contact button. The phone automatically dialed Adrian's number 3 times in a row, but he didn't answer before the ringing stopped. Tears mixed with the rainwater as I completely lost consciousness. I woke up again to find that a kind person had sent me to the hospital room. Adrian was standing by the bedside, his face pale. His chin was covered with bluish stubble, looking so pitiful. I closed my eyes directly, unwilling to look at him anymore. Panic appeared on his face, his voice trembling. "Sorry, I didn't know you called me." My phone was dead and turned off. I just rushed over from the country. Maggie. Maggie was given a critical condition notice and said she wanted to see me one last time. What does that have to do with me? We have already broken up. It's your freedom to go see whoever you want. It was me once again suffering from my own doing. I had to have a bloody lesson right in front of me before I was willing to believe that I never had a place in his heart. The broken ribs hurt so much that cold sweat appeared on my forehead with every breath. He reached out to wipe it for me, but I coldly said, "Get lost. This is the end between us. Don't ever show up in front of me again. Go find Maggie." Adrian finally realized he was going to lose me forever. He hurriedly said, "I've already gone back to check. I didn't expect her to lie to me about this. I can never trust her again. I've made it clear to her that from now on, she has nothing to do with me." Does it matter? There was no emotion in my voice. Looking into his eyes, I felt like I was staring at a stranger. The emotions in his eyes gradually cracked open. He opened his mouth to explain but had nothing to say. "Believe me just once, Elena." I furrowed my brows, enduring the sharp pain in my chest as I spoke. "Adrian, we're over, completely, forever. Don't make me hate you." His pupils trembled, and the hand he reached out with froze midair. Meeting my eyes full of hatred, he finally stopped speaking. After a few minutes of stalemate, he completely gave up. He turned and left the hospital room. His figure seemed to disappear from my life. Except for the Chinese meals delivered punctually to the hospital door every day. After being discharged, I returned to the company. Passing by his department, he was buried in writing a proposal. We became the most familiar strangers to each other in this company. Even work-related communication had to rely on emails. For a whole year. He thought he was hiding it well, but I could still notice that gaze directed at me during meetings. As time passed, it grew increasingly passionate and intense. Until a large bouquet of roses was delivered to my desk. He went mad and rushed up to me to confront me. I looked at his crazed expression for love, exactly like I was a few years ago. I just said lightly, I'm in love. When it's time to get married, I'll send you an invitation. It's the person who saved me in the heavy rain that day. After hearing this, he left in a daze. The next day, the company announced that he had completed his training and returned to the country. This was our best ending. That day, my boyfriend and I discussed the wedding date. This time, I want to be a happy bride,